Middle of the country, but not middle of the road opinions. It's the podcast dedicated to sports in the air capital of the world.
I'm going to Wichita.
Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. With Tommy Castor, Weston Mills, and Blake Cripps. This is Keeper of the Games.
Welcome to Keeper of the Games. I like to call us the wildly underqualified yet mildly entertaining podcast that is all about sports in Wichita, Kansas, the air capital, and beyond. I'm Tommy Castor. We're back for another episode here of Keeper of the Games as we dig out of the Arctic blast that this part of the country has received over the last few days. And I got to start off by saying, Weston, I know it's probably colder in Kansas City than it is in Wichita right now, but today, at least in Wichita, the high got up to like 21. It felt like a balmy 60 degrees outside after what we've seen the last few days.
18. I think it got up to 18 here, so that felt pretty nice. But I don't know if you guys, I know you guys were pretty dang cold, but I think we hit, up negative 30, 31 over the last couple days. I lost power for about an hour yesterday. I don't know if you guys got caught up in those rolling blackouts, but I mean, it's just been brutal. It really, I don't think I ever remember anything like this.
Yeah, it's been absolutely insane. And so I'm glad that we are starting to thaw out a little bit from what we saw a few days ago. And I'm also glad that we were able to pull Blake Cripps away from the Australian Open tennis tournament going on right now, the big major. I'm shocked that you're here right now as opposed to not watching tennis.
Oh, fantastic tournament so far. I've been really enjoying it. I'll share this quick anecdote about being cold up in Nebraska, Fairbury, at my first job at KUTT and KGMT. There was a stretch where we went about 2 weeks where the temperature did not get above single digits. And I remember walking outside. The coldest it got was a negative 37 wind chill. And there was snow on the ground from November to March. There was every day had snow on the ground, at least some. And I remember walking out to work one day and thinking, and it was 10 degrees outside, and thinking, man, it's not that bad out today. And that's when I knew I had hit rock bottom.
Well, so what you're telling me is that what we've been going through the last few days is nothing. You've been prepared for it for years now, right?
This is cold. I don't think that there's any way that you get prepared for this. They say, you just get used to it. You get prepared for this. You don't get prepared for this. It's freaking cold, and I'm done with it.
I'm not going to lie to you guys. There was a part of me as recently as Tuesday that I was thinking about us recording this new episode, and I was legitimately concerned that we were going to have a power outage, or at least one of us was going to have a power outage in the middle of trying to record this. I don't think it's going to happen now, but I was a little bit concerned about that. So fingers crossed that we can get through this entire episode with no issues. But I'm glad to see you guys, Weston Mills, Blake Cripps, here on Keeper of the Games. Before we dive into our episode, again, just a reminder to hit like, to hit subscribe, download, listen to the podcast on all major podcast platforms. We're on every single major streaming platform out there like Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, all the major ones. Our website, KOGsports.com, KOGsports.com. You can watch full episodes on YouTube and Facebook by searching for Keeper of the Games, and you should, as we have upped our production quality pretty significantly here on the program. And of course, you can follow us anytime on Twitter and Instagram at KOGpod. That's at KOGpod. On this episode, we've got a lot to get to, including a big trade for the Kansas City Royals, a little bit of a look at their spring training up ahead, the Wichita Wind Surge starting to get some things into motion for their season coming up, the Wichita Whiparound, and a lot more. But we begin on this episode with our College Hoops Roundup. And guys, we are starting out by talking about the Wichita State Shockers. We'll get into the Sunflower Showdown, which is actually going on as we're recording this show. In fact, I've got it on here off to the side. We'll talk about KU and K-State in just a few minutes, but kicking off the show by talking about a massive matchup that is on the way Thursday night inside the Roundhouse as Wichita State takes on the Houston Cougars, who are currently ranked number 6 in the AP Top 25. This is, again, a massive game for Wichita State. And at one point earlier this week, because of the weather, we weren't sure it was going to happen. There have been all of these delays and pauses and rescheduling and postponements in college basketball this year. And I thought it was going to happen again, but for weather. But it does does look like Houston at right now, at this moment, is on their way to Wichita. In fact, they probably already landed in the ICT in anticipation of the game on Thursday night. So Blake, I will start with you, and then Weston, you can go after this. Simply put, just a quick question for you. How big of a matchup in your mind is this game for Wichita State?
Well, I mean, when you're talking about several decades since Wichita State has done something, I mean, this matchup qualifies as that. I was reading in the Wichita Eagle today, Taylor Eldridge had the story, game notes are out. This would be the biggest win for Wichita State, their first top 6 win since 1967 when they beat number 2 Louisville 84-78. Since then, they have lost 6 games, 0-6 against the top 6. Their last opportunity to play a top 6 game was 1992. Of course, they beat number 5 Cincinnati, but that was on the road. The last top 10 win against a team in Koch Arena was back in 2015. They beat Northern Iowa in that huge game, number 10 Panthers 74-60. So when you're talking, it's been 50 years since Wichita State has been able to grab a win this massive. Yeah, I mean, in a historical context, this is a huge game.
Isn't that surprising, though? I mean, just because I read that same article too, and just with pretty much the decade of dominance that Wichita State has had, for some reason, I just would have thought they would have had a win like that, and they haven't. It's been 50 years. That's kind of crazy.
When you have a conference like the Missouri Valley, that those last few years they were so horrible, who are they going to play in conference? It's going to bring that kind of a ranking to the party. It's going to have to be a non-conference, and a lot of non-conference teams have been a little wary of playing the Shockers because they've been so good. It's not a guaranteed win. Not every team wants to challenge themselves like that in the non-conference schedule. So I think it's got a better chance of happening now in the American for sure, but in the Valley, the last 5 years, no chance. The Valley was horrible.
Well, and you've even seen, you've seen stretches where both the Missouri Valley and then obviously the AAC, have had, multiple teams get in or multiple teams be good, but it always just feels like there's just the one team, right, that kind of is the dominant one, and then a few others that, hey, they strung together a few quality non-con wins and this and that, and you just haven't had those matchups. And then, like you said, Blake, because Wichita State is, a mid-major, even though I think the narrative on mid-majors has changed and is still changing over the years, it's hard to get that quality non-con game scheduled because it's kind of a lose-lose for, some of the blue bloods or even just a Power 5 perennial winner in any one of those leagues, because if that team wins, well, they were supposed to be Wichita State. Wichita State's a mid-major. And if they lose, oh my God, it's a huge upset. And again, I think that narrative's changing though. And I guess
really consider American conference teams to be mid-majors at this point. I mean, it's the 6th best conference.
Yeah,
you do.
I do. I mean, if you're outside, and I get that it wouldn't be classified that way, but if you're outside the Power 5, I mean, well, and look at it this way.
Power 6, honestly. I mean,
why
should the American be in that conversation?
Because they're going to get one team in the tournament. I mean, you can't have you're not a big major conference if you're only going to get one of your, I mean, and I'm going to embarrass myself by not knowing this. How many teams are in the American? Is it 14 or 16?
No, it's less than that.
I think it's 12.
Sure?
UConn's
12. Okay,
and
but
Navy
either way,
does
they're going to
play basketball in. I think it's 11 actually, because Navy does not play. Wichita State replaces them because Navy only plays football in the American, replacing Wichita State. So I think 12 is the right number.
And I guess that's what I was thinking about. But either way, I mean, if you're only going to get one in, and they're, I mean, I don't think they're the Power 6 if you're consistently not putting. And I get this year would be, I don't know, a down year for the American, right? I mean, they're typically getting 2-3 teams in the tournament, but anyways, I think we kind of strayed away from the question, though. I do think, this is obviously such a big game. And I think that hopefully Wichita State as a program is getting to a place where you can see more of these big games, whether it's because they're in the American or now they've kind of established themselves as a great program where maybe these major schools don't look at it as, okay, look, if we were to lose Wichita State, nobody's considering that an upset because, look, they're a good established program. So hopefully we're getting there with Wichita State basketball.
Correction and retraction. There are 11 teams in the American
I had that
Conference.
right. Hey, how about that?
I know. So there you go. Houston coming into this game, they absolutely took it to USF a week ago. So it would have been Wednesday, February 10th. Final score of that game was 82-65. So 17-point win on the road for Houston. And then going back the game before Saturday, February 6th, this got a lot of national attention just because of the opponent. Houston, the number 6 team in the country, beat Our Lady of the Lake. Final score of that game was 112-46. Those are the 2 games that the Cougars have played since they were upset on the road against East Carolina by 9 the first Wednesday of February. So again, it's a pretty, not just a pretty important game, but it's a very important game, not only for Wichita State, but for the conference in general. It's a conference that, Weston, like you said, as of right now, probably will only send one team to the tournament, and that's Houston. Now there are chances for not only Wichita State to get into the tournament, but also SMU to get into the tournament as well. This is a pretty brutal stretch of games, a 3-game stretch for the Shockers, starting with this Houston game at home. Then they play back-to-back games against SMU. Now, Blake, Joe Lenardi from Black Bracketology, who is obviously an expert. He's not the only expert out there. He's kind of subjective when it comes to what he wants to do bracket wise. He's got SMU currently on the next 4 out. Wichita State is nowhere on that list, but he did say on social media this week that if Wichita State can upset Houston, then he would put Wichita State on the next 4 out list. So as far as bracket seeding is concerned, we all know how important this game is, not only for just the standings in the American and just even the shot for the Shockers to have a hope to get into the big dance, but just overall bracket wise, where do you see the conference right now? And I know Weston talked a little bit about that just a moment ago, but where do you see that?
Real-time RPI has the American Athletic Conference as the 7th best conference in the country. And obviously it's a little bit misleading because you look at the teams ahead of them. You've got the Power 5 conferences in front of them. Obviously the Big 12 is first. I think that there are some people up in Big 10 country who would say the Big 10 is by far and away the best conference. And like I said, that's a discussion that we could have, probably a discussion for another show though. But you got the Power 5 conferences in front, and then the outlier is the West Coast Conference. And obviously, if you subtract Gonzaga from the West Coast Conference, you've got a lot of BYU is a fairly solid team, and St. Mary's is a team that can be discussed as being an NCAA tournament team. They've been the second bid for a lot of years, but I think that Wichita State is kind of staring that next 4 line. That's about where they should be. Wichita State is currently 35th in the RPI. They're the second highest RPI in the conference right now, according to real-time RPI, which doesn't necessarily take into account everything. I'm not sure of what Wichita State's net is. Wichita State's strength of schedule is 44. I believe firmly, and I have still not gotten off the Shocker bandwagon. If the Shocker at this point, because they have not been able to play the games, and there are games that they have lost not in on the scoreboard, but they've lost due to not being able to play them, I think we're at the point right now that there are 2 scenarios that Wichita State gets into the tournament. If they win out on the regular season, I think that they will be in as long as they don't lose in the first round of the American Athletic Conference tournament, or they win the tournament. I think those are the 2 scenarios that gets Wichita State in. I cannot and I will not believe that if Wichita State ends the regular season where they have 5 games left or 6, if you include the tournament, I will not be persuaded that if Wichita State wins the rest of their games, that they are not in the tournament. I can't be persuaded that that's the case.
But I guess my question, and Weston, I'll throw it to you. Realistically, I mean, we all know that the next 3 games for Wichita State it's brutal. I mean, it's just a juggernaut playing Houston at home, but then, back-to-back against SMU. Realistically, what are we looking at for the Shockers, in those 3 games? Are we looking, I don't know if there's anybody out there that's going to say, oh yeah, Wichita State's going to go 3-0 in that 3-game stretch. We know how essential these games are for the Shockers. What do we think is going to be important there? And I guess Blake, you'd like to answer that first.
Yeah, you said who's saying they're going to go 3-0? This guy.
Wow.
I'm projecting it
Fair
right
enough.
now. Wichita State is going 5-0 to end the regular season. It's not you're right. Very accurate take. Thank you very much. Appreciate the compliment as always. Yeah, I'll put myself out there. I think they're going to win out. I think they're going to go to the NCAA tournament and win these 3 games that they have to win. And you get 2 wins against SMU, who's in the top 60, and 1 against Houston. For me, you're going to be in. You're just going to be in.
Okay, we
I
had
think
the
the
pie in the sky answer. What's the realistic answer,
Oh,
Weston?
God. Okay.
Well, look, here's the thing. I think it's going to be tough to play SMU back-to-back. I'm almost more concerned about that than I am against Houston. I think Wichita State absolutely can come out and beat Houston. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't think that they can. Of course, it's going to be a tough game. I'm certainly not suggesting that. But I'm more concerned with the back-to-back against SMU. I think it is incredibly tough to play the same team twice, to keep the same level of motivation up twice, and then just from there, when you go and beat a team, sometimes I think it's easier to take, as the loser, to take that game film and say, okay, this is what they did to us, and here's what we're going to do next time to counteract that, than it is to go and beat a team and then watch your winning game film and go, okay, well, here's the things that we still didn't do well, and put together a different game plan. I mean, it's hard to divert away from a winning game plan, right? So, it's just a lot to beat a team back to back. So I'm almost more concerned about that stretch than I am the game against Houston. And a good, comparable is, we saw Kansas play Iowa State, which is one of the worst teams probably in the country, and struggled pretty heavily the first half, I guess I would say, of that second game. Obviously, they went on to, to cruise in that game eventually, but it's Iowa State. But kind of that shows just that, it's just hard to get up for that second game, and then, the adjustments that are made. So that would be my bigger concern is the second run against SMU.
So I'll tell you, I think that what we're going to end up seeing, just my opinion, I think that, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Like you guys have said, that the Shockers can get up for Houston and beat the Cougars at home. Let's keep in mind, they only lost by 7 on the road in the first meeting against the Cougars. So, that was a closer game than I think a lot of people anticipated. So I think that they can win inside the Roundhouse. I think they can also beat SMU, take 1 of 2 from them. I'm kind of with you, Weston. I'm not sure that they can take both in back-to-back sets. I think they could probably get them at home. So I'm going to go ahead and book that. And then I think that they'll have not an easy time, but I think that they'll be able to beat Tulane on the road and Temple on the road. And I think realistically, you're looking at Wichita State, going 3-2 in their last 5 games. That would put them overall at 11-4 in the conference, and with an overall record of 15-6 before the conference tournament starts. Now, again, that's probably not enough to get Wichita State into the tournament, that resume alone, and they're going to have to do some work in the tournament. I think that they're going to be right on the bubble, and when that ends up happening, there's going to be a lot of discussion about whether or not Wichita State is deserving of a bid or not, and if they can win the conference tournament, then that entire conversation is put to bed. That's kind of the way that I see it playing out. Blake, I want to ask you, going back to this game on Thursday inside the Roundhouse, like I just said, the Shockers, they only lost by 7 to Houston the first time around. What's it going to take for Wichita State in this game to get the W against the Cougars?
Well, I think that fast breaks are going to be really, really important. And, RJ Allen, the head coach of Newman, has told me several times said, he thinks that the transition play from offense to defense, defense to offense is the toughest play in basketball. And Houston is 8th in the country in what they call potential quick points on Haslametrics, field goal attempts that occur within 10 seconds of getting a steal. So they are really good at turning you over and then getting a shot up, because you don't have a lot of time to set up your defense if you're taking a shot within 10 seconds. They take a lot of field goals. They lead the country in field goals attempted per 100 trips up the court against an average defense. They don't turn it over. They're 19th in offensive efficiency and 3rd in defensive efficiency. So if you can win the turnover battle and win the transition game and allow them, decrease the amount of time that they have to set up what is a really good half-court defense and get your own transition points and try to turn off their transition that they're so good at, I think that that's going to be a real big advantage for Wichita State if they can do that. Now, obviously, not necessarily the easiest thing to do because Houston's, the number 6 team in the country. They allow the 6th fewest field goals attempted per 100 trips up court in the country. So they're really good at stopping teams from taking shots, and they turn teams over. So I'm not saying this is easy, but if they can do it, I think that that's going to be the recipe for success. Win the fast break battle against Houston. That's my number one thing. There are other keys, but I would say that's the number one key for Wichita State to win this game.
So I want to talk about the Houston game, but I do want to go back for a second and point out a possibility. So let's say the Shockers were to lose to Houston, to beat Houston and then lose to SMU, and we end the regular season with Houston and Wichita State having the same record in conference. Do we know what the tiebreaker is? Assuming that means they split. I don't know what follows that, or does the American share a regular season conference?
Most conferences would share the regular season championship, and there would be a tiebreaker for the number 1 seed in the tournament. But in terms of the championships, the conference typically recognizes all of the tied teams, even if there is a situation where the head-to-head tiebreaker would favor one team. If one team swept the other, both teams would still be recognized as conference champions.
So, and I guess Houston ends the season with Memphis too. So I don't think it's out of the question potentially that Wichita State could lose, one of the games and still end up winning the regular season American. And I would just, again, kind of back to your point, Blake, I know it's not an automatic bid, but boy, it'd be hard to not put the American Conference regular season champion into the tournament. So
just saying.
So going back to the game against Houston, we're looking at two things here defensively for the Shockers, and I know, you talked about a lot of it, but two players that the Shockers really have to focus on stopping, and that's Quentin Grimes and Marcus Sasser. And old Quentin Grimes, who's really come on, he used to be played for Kansas. Did 2 seasons ago now? I don't know if I'm So, and boy, he has really come on for Houston. So I think that's going to be, potentially a matchup for Dexter Dennis. See how he matches up against Quentin Grimes. Quentin Grimes, big, athletic guard. And that's obviously what we see out of Dexter Dennis as well. But I think it's going to be Dexter Dennis on the defensive end. And then, I don't think there's any surprise. What can Tyson Etienne do on the other end? So I think keeping it simple, that's kind of my 2 takeaways for the game.
Quentin Grimes had 22 points, by the way, in the first matchup that the Wichita State Shockers had against Houston on the road. And, the other thing that I want to point out is that, Weston, you mentioned Houston's schedule. Not only do they finish the regular season with Memphis, who is a top tier American team, but they finish with Memphis on the road to add that, a little bit extra, difficulty. I don't disagree with you. I think there is an opportunity where, Houston could drop one more game, and that could open the door a little bit more for the Shockers, but you have to take care of business on Thursday night, regardless, inside the Roundhouse. You have to be able to do that and control your own destiny. And the best way for the Shockers to do that, in my opinion, is to not play like they did the last time out, especially in the closing stretch of the last game. This was right after we released our last episode a week ago. The Shockers went on the road to take on UCF. And for some reason, I don't know what it is, Blake, when the Shockers play UCF, it's always it's been a tight game both times out this year for Wichita State, and in this case the Shockers escape with a 61-60 victory. I know you were watching that game. Your thoughts about the final moments and the final stretch of that game for Wichita State?
Well, yeah, I was listening to it, and you look back. I don't know if I'm not going to answer your question that way, but think back to the last few games for Wichita State. Temple was a 3-point win. Central Florida was a 1-point win. Tulane was a single-digit win. That's UCF the first time was an overtime and a 5-point win. So this is not just the Central Florida game. This has been the last few stretches. This last stretch for Wichita State, it's been about, 3 weeks, going back to January 30th since they didn't play the Cincinnati game. And then they obviously lost by 20 at Memphis. So this has been a situation where Wichita State has not been able to kind of execute well enough offensively down the stretch. They've played good defense, I think, in all these games, maybe with the exception. Coach Brown probably would not like the defense so much against UCF in Wichita, the overtime win. But the other games, they've played well enough defensively. It's been a lack of offensive execution down the stretch, not making shots, turning the ball over a little bit too much. And also, I'd like to point out, not doing themselves a ton of favors at the free throw line, which I think could also be really big in this Houston game to wrap it back to the Cougars. Houston is 287th in the country in personal fouls per game. They average 19 personal fouls per game. Wichita State is second in the American Conference in free throws attempted and free throws made, but they're only seventh in free throw percentage at 69.6%. So if Wichita State could shoot a little bit better at the free throw line, get Houston in some early foul trouble, that could also be a really big benefit for Wichita State in that Houston game.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And when it comes to shooting, when you look at how Wichita State is defending shooters, especially beyond the arc, only one team has made more than 36% from three. And that's Memphis against the Shockers. So,
Memphis is a good team.
Defensively, we talked about defensively, how Dexter Dennis has really stepped up over the last several weeks or so. I think, the one thing we know about Houston, especially with guys like Quentin Grimes on that roster, they can shoot the basketball. They like to shoot the basketball a lot. And let's not kid ourselves, guys. We're not just talking about a game against a formidable opponent. We're legitimately talking about a game against a national title contender. That's what the Houston Cougars are. That's what Kelvin Sampson has in his squad. So I absolutely agree with you, Blake. Defensively, Wichita State is going to have to turn it up and guard like crazy if they want a chance to get out of this game. My last question about the matchup before we move on. I noticed this a little bit ago, kind of surprising to me, but I want to get your guys' take on it. Houston, as of right now, is a 10-point favorite. Does Houston cover that spread inside the Roundhouse on Thursday night?
I mean, I know what my answer is.
Yeah, I'm going to say absolutely not as well. I know that's your answer too, Blake. There's no way. And it's kind of a perfect segue, Tommy, because you had just mentioned that, you think Kelvin Sampson thinks he has a national contending team. And as I was sitting here, I was kind of looking at some stuff. I just was thinking to myself, boy, in my head, there's just not that big of gap between the talent I see from Wichita State and the talent that I see from Houston. How is Houston ranked number 6 in the nation? And I think they are going to be a prime candidate for an early upset when March rolls around.
Wow.
If you look at the schedule, they have only beaten number 14 Texas Tech. That is the only ranked team that they've beaten all year. I guess I just don't understand. I get they're 17-2, but what about that schedule shows that they're the 6th best team in the country when you only have one ranked win, and then your 2 losses coming to Tulsa in East Carolina? I mean, I'm just not buying that this team is who they say they are. I'm not saying they're not good, that they're not that they're not tournament worthy, and I certainly think it would be a big win for Wichita State. But again, you play the cards that are dealt, and they just haven't beaten anybody that impresses me. Not one team.
So I think the answer is that there's only, you either believe, it depends on who you ask, you either believe that there are 2 legitimate national championship teams this year, or there are 25. So if you're in the 2 camp, then you say, okay, Gonzaga and Baylor have far and away set themselves apart from every other team, and the other 25 teams are, in the next basket, and it doesn't really matter. Or you say, okay, the parity is so great this year. Even, Gonzaga has been played tough by a few of those teams in that next mix, and Baylor's been played tough by a few of those teams, and so anybody can win it. So I think that kind of informs the answer. Do you believe that Gonzaga and Baylor are far and away better than everybody else, or do you think that it's more like, okay, anybody in the top 25 has a legitimate chance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I would just say that, I recognize that, things are different this season due to limited crowds and attendance. And so home court advantage is, sort of null and void right now. But I don't care if you're Gonzaga, Baylor, Houston, Our Lady of the Lake. I think it's good. I think you're going to be hard pressed for any team to beat Wichita State inside the Roundhouse by more than 10. Like, I don't care who you are. And that can even be a mediocre Wichita State team. I think it's hard. I think it's difficult to beat a Shocker team by that many points inside the Roundhouse. So when I saw that, as far as Houston being a 10-point favorite coming into to Charles Koch Arena on Thursday night, that really surprised me. You know, at the end of the day, if the Cougars get the win, I won't be surprised. I mean, I'll be disappointed, but I won't be super surprised by that because I think it could go either way. But a 10-point victory is pretty resounding, and I'm just not sure that that's going to be the outcome. Regardless, though, it's a massive game for Wichita State. Blake, did you have one more thing?
So, well, I was just going to say, and I know that it's not something that we would like to bring up, obviously, but Wichita State did lose to Missouri by 10 at the Roundhouse this season. So it can happen. I'm not picking it to happen, not predicting it to happen, but that they've only got 2 double-digit losses all season. That one, and then obviously Memphis when they just couldn't shoot the ball. If you score 52 points, you're just not going to win, and you're probably going to get blown out. Not because you played bad, just because you can't. They had a ice cold day shooting, and they didn't score enough points to win. But it has happened before. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and that's why I said it'd be hard to beat the Shockers by more than 10 because they did lose by 10 exactly against Missouri. It's all about the semantics and the verbiage, right? That's
Oh, yeah, sure.
So this game against Houston.
You sound like the lawyer of the group, Tommy.
I'm taking my cues from you. This game will be on ESPN2 on Thursday night as Wichita State takes on Houston in this massive American Conference matchup. You want to talk about some titillating basketball? It is currently a slobber knocker as we are recording this podcast, as the Kansas Jayhawks are leading the Kansas State Wildcats with just over a minute left in the first half by a score of 18-15. And actually, as I say that,
yuck,
they just made a 3-pointer, so it's actually 21-15. Kansas is leading the Wildcats, but regardless, in offensive outpouring, this is not inside of Bramlage Coliseum between the Jayhawks and the Wildcats. We got a lot to get to as we talk KU and K-State, kind of away from the Sunflower Showdown, but also talking about that sort of as it's going on. I'm not sure why anybody would be surprised by this. And Weston, I'll start with you. Even when you've got a great Kansas team and a terrible Kansas State team, it's always difficult for the Jayhawks to go inside of Bramlage, crowd or not, and resoundingly beat the Wildcats. Are you surprised by this early score of 21-15 late in the first half?
No, definitely does not surprise me the way Kansas has been playing this year. Does not surprise me the way Kansas State has been playing this year. And then the history between Kansas and Kansas State, it just always seems like, just one of those sloppy, slow paced turnovers, missed shots. I mean, that just always seems to be the Kansas State matchup. I don't know if it's because of the energy followed by nerves of the players or what, but does not surprise me one bit. And particularly this year with both teams just not putting the product on the floor that we've seen in years past.
Well, these teams have combined so far to go 1 for 18 from the 3-point line, and I'm really surprised that Kansas is not leading by more. If you'd have told me that Nigel Pack would come out and go 1 for 5 and have only essentially what they got 61%, 61 seconds left in the first half, 61%. Nobody's shooting 61% in this game unless it's from the free throw line, that's for sure. So if you would have told me with a minute left that Nigel Pack is 1 for 5 and Kansas State is 0 for 11 from the 3-point line, I probably would have thought that KU was leading by a little bit more. Gordon's having a nice day. If you're a Jayhawk fan, it's great to see Jalen Wilson. He has really come on in the last few games. He's got 11 points and 6 rebounds. And KU's been able to hold this lead despite David McCormick kind of being a non-factor in this first half. He's averaged 16 points per game over the last 5, been a really critical part of KU's offense. He's only got 3 shot attempts today, but KU starting to pull away at the free throw line a little bit. They've outscored Kansas State 9-1 at the free throw line, and so Kansas State trailing by 7 after another Gordon jumper. DeJuan Gordon has been fantastic in this game, 10 points on 5 of 8 shooting, but I would have thought coming in that Nigel Pack would have had a really good game for Kansas State to be this close. I mean, obviously, if you lose both halves by 7, you lose by 14, and that's really not that close. But KU, it definitely seems to me, Tommy, forcing 8 first half turnovers. And they lead points off turnovers 15-4. So Kansas State has turned 8 KU turnovers into only 4 points. It feels like there's a missed opportunity here to lead by a little more. Now they're getting a little flurry here down the stretch with baskets and free throws on 3 straight possessions, but it just seems like, KU could have pushed the lead a little bit further, but a nice little blitz here at the end to lead by 9 at the half.
Yeah, so at halftime, as we're recording this, obviously by the time this episode drops, you'll all know what the final score is, and so will we. But at halftime, the Jayhawks have a 9-point lead, 26-17. Currently on pace for a final score of 52-34, which is absolutely
nasty.
Brutal. But that does lead me as far as the offensive output for Kansas is concerned. We'll talk about Kansas State here in a couple of moments, but offensively for Kansas, I don't know if you guys caught this, but I watched Bill Self on an episode of another podcast with Jeff Goodman and I think Rob Doster was the other host. He was on earlier this week talking about a lot of different things. It was a long, like a 30-minute long interview with Bill Self, and it was really good stuff. But one of the things he talked about was kind of the offensive output and how things are different for this Kansas team this year as opposed to last year when you had guys like Devon Dotson and Udoka Azubuike. And one of the things that Coach Self talked about was how with Doak out on the court, every time the ball, or even before the ball came to Doak's man had to stay on him. Like nobody could help off of Doak. That you just couldn't do it because of how dominant Doak was down low. This year, teams are realizing that you can help off of David McCormick a little bit more than you could Doak, making it really difficult for guys like Marcus Garrett and Christian Brown and other drivers to get into the paint and shoot at the rim. It's just more difficult to do that when we've seen guys like Devon Dotson do that in years past, Frank Mason, Devontae Graham, all those guys drive to the rim in years past. It's been a lot more difficult for the players to do that this year because teams are realizing they can help a little bit more at the rim than they were able to do in years past. I thought that was really interesting because, we look at guys like Marcus Garrett and we see him drive the ball in and it gets rejected or he misses bunnies or the layups are always contested and they're not dropping like they did for guys like Frank Mason and Devontae Graham. And I think the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, Marcus Garrett isn't good at that, or that's not Marcus Garrett's game, or he needs to be more off ball or whatever. I'm wondering what your take on that is. And Blake, I'll start with you. That's coming from Bill Self himself. What's your reaction to that as far as the way that the Kansas offense has to run this season? And does that contribute to kind of the logjam that we've seen, kind of the really difficult time that the Jayhawks have scoring the basketball?
I would say possibly, and I would never point out or argue that David McCormick is as good of a player as Udoka Azubuike was. That's just a fallacy, absolutely false. My first inclination, my first response or question that I would ask Bill Self if I had him on the show, which by the way, Tommy, why don't you go ahead and work on that for us for next week? That'd be great.
I'll do my best.
I appreciate it. My first question would be, is it possible that KU is just the guards that we have this year are not as good of passers off the dribble as we have had in the past? Because guys like Frank Mason, Dotson, they were really good at drawing the double team when they got into the lane and then finding the open guy on the pass. And I'm wondering, with the extra turnovers that KU has had this year, maybe we are not as good. I don't think of Garrett as being as good of a passer. The stats may not bear that out, but that's the first thing that I think of, Weston, is that maybe KU is not quite as good of a passing team off the dribble in the painted area as in the past. Certainly, if McCormick plays better, the offense is going to open up more as teams will have to sag on him and be able to help off of him less. And he's certainly not as an athletic and as dominant of a finisher around the rim. Well, let's be honest. Udoka Azubuike makes a lot of average passes, fine. When you can just basically throw it up within a 2-yard radius of the basket and Udoka's just going to, okay, I'll just reach out here and just dunk it. That's fine. He made so many bad passes look like highlight reel plays last year. Let's give the big man a little bit of credit too. He was absolutely phenomenal. McCormick is definitely not that kind of a finisher around the basket yet. But if he improves, I think he can get closer to that, and that will help Kansas when they are driving off the dribble with Brown or Wilson or Garrett or these other guys that want to use their Abaji, who want to use their dribble to get to the basket.
First of all, thoughts to Big Doke. I don't know if you guys saw the gruesome injury that
God,
he
that
suffered.
Hate it.
I guess last week. But yeah, no, it's interesting because there's some give and take, though, right? I mean, we have some guys that you can see have had the ability. Jalen Wilson at moments has shown he can be an incredible passer, and then at
He
times
was the Big 12 newcomer of the week.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
But and there's some guys that have that innate ability to find other people on the floor when it doesn't appear to be there. There's a difference between that and then the Division I basketball player who certainly knows when to make an appropriate pass because the play is developed in that manner. That's two separate things, right? And kind of to your point, Blake, we've had some guys that just had that innate ability to find a guy when it doesn't necessarily look like that guy is open or there, or throw it to a spot and let a guy go get it. We just don't have that with this team. But there are some other aspects to this team that make me go, well, I would think that getting to the rim would be maybe a little bit more easy. I get that David McCormick isn't that presence inside, but he has shown that he can shoot in a 15-foot radius pretty well. And I'm kind of surprised. And I guess the problem is yes, he's shown he can do it and in an effective manner. But I think most coaches are still going to say we will absolutely, if we lose because David McCormick hits 15, 10, 15.
Oh, you'll pick that poison all day for sure.
Absolutely. So the fact that he has that skill set doesn't really translate into helping open up the lane. But then on the flip side, we have more shooters this year, and I guess I more mean in a sense of more guys who want to look to shoot first. So that's kind of does a couple things, right? You would think on one hand that that's going to open up the lane if you've got more shooters that teams feel like they can't come off of. The problem has been consistency, right? We have, I think of Brown, I think of Ochai, certainly Wilson have shown very moments where they're get really hot and then moments where they go really cold. So I think, again, most teams are going to say, you know what, we'll take a chance that one of those guys get hot. And we're not going to say, you can't leave him. You're not a no help guy. You can go help in the lane. And then of course, on the flip side, when you have guys that tend to look to shoot first, whether the lane is open or not, I think that's also part of it. You're just not going to see, and it's weird because as you've watched the season, you can kind of, to me, it seems like you can tell Bill's had those conversations. We need to get into the lane to open up other aspects of our game. I feel like you've seen Garrett be more aggressive recently. You've seen Brown go to the rim more aggressively instead of just taking the shot, even though he's always going to be a shooter first guy. So there's just a lot going on. And I don't want to just pin it on, obviously McCormick not being that presence of Doak, but that it all certainly plays into it as well.
I mean,
more
consistent 3-point shooting would be nice too.
Yeah. Here's the thing about David McCormick, and I want to go back to, and I don't want this to be a, harp on David McCormick show. I feel like we've done that in past episodes, but one of the conversations that you guys had a week ago, kind of the debate, I think Weston, you had said that McCormick has played pretty horribly, and Blake, you're like, no, he's scored, 20 plus points in however many games, kind of going back and forth on that. The question with David McCormick is not his athletic ability. It's not his talent. It's not even his consistency. It's the efficiency at which he scores for this Kansas team. Now, it's pretty hard when you're following a guy like Udoka Azubuike, who took all of these high percentage shots and dunked the ball every single time he touched it. That's not what David McCormick's game is. But I found this stat that I think is really interesting, and I think it really sheds light on the frustration that I think Kansas fans have had with David McCormick this season. There have been, and I don't know if you guys saw this, there have been 28 players that have played for Kansas in the Bill Self era, going all the way back to 2003, that have averaged more than 10 shots a game throughout the course of the entire season. So number one on that list is Devontae Graham. Back in the 2017-28 season, he averaged 12.8 shots per game, but he played 37.8 minutes a game. You've also got guys like Frank Mason, who's number two on that list. Devon Dotson's on there. Sharon Collins, Svi Mikhailuk is on there. Wayne Simeon, Andrew Wiggins, Brandon Rush, Thomas Robinson. You get the idea. Perry Ellis is on the list. Number 28 on that list is David McCormick. So David McCormick is one of the 28 players in the Bill Self era that has averaged 10 or more shots a game. Right now, he's averaging 10.4 shots per game, but he has by far played the fewest minutes per game out of those 28 players. He's averaged 22 minutes a game, where all of these other guys are averaging in the 30s or high 20s. So he's not playing a ton of minutes. He's playing 22 minutes a game on average, and he is launching the ball every time he gets it. And so I think that's the problem. If he was knocking down all those shots, he's averaging 13 points a game. If you're going to shoot it at that clip, then you better be averaging more points than 13 per game. That's not a bad number at all, but it could be a lot better if he was more efficient. And so I think that that's part of the problem that Jayhawk fans have with what David McCormick is doing. It's like every time he's in the game, he's going to shoot it. And a lot of them are, close up, but he doesn't have the kind of efficiency that Udoka Azubuike had. Thoughts on that?
I mean, nobody is going to, and he's shooting coming into this week. He's got the fifth best field goal percentage in the Big 12. Fifth best. So, I mean, how much more efficiently do you want him to be shooting? I think the post defense this year, relative to what Udoka Azubuike had to go up against, is a little bit better. Obviously, McCormick is much less of a player than Udoka Azubuike was. There's no question. I don't want this to turn into a McCormick is better than Azubuike. He's not, period. But, I mean, he's shooting 49% from the field. I mean, you don't have – KU fans, if they don't like David McCormick, here's the deal. You're spoiled because people don't go and shoot 70%, 80% in games, even if they're shooting in the paint. That doesn't happen. You don't guys
even Azubuike, but even Azubuike was not shooting it as Doak was nowhere on that list as far as average number of field goals. Like he was not shooting it as much as David McCormick is, and Udoka was averaging significantly more points than David McCormick is currently.
Well, I mean, like I said, McCormick's fifth. He's fifth in the league in field goal percentage. I mean, do you want him to shoot 60%? I mean, do you want him to not shoot when he gets the ball in where he should be scoring?
Well, but he's not scoring on those opportunities.
He is. He's in the top 20 in the conference in scoring.
But again, look, we're having a conversation about, field goal percentage, and it's all relative, right? Because the problem is the game of basketball is not played that way anymore. You are not going to win only shooting 60%, with the 20 shots from two. That's just not the way the game's played anymore. And unless you are of a field goal percentage like Azubuike, you probably should never allow someone to take the number of shots that Dave, and it's not even an allow. Like I get it's game flow and those kind of things, but again, it goes to efficiency, and the 3-point shot is more efficient than the 2-point shot in today's game of basketball. So when you are shooting 60%, that's a high number, but it's not high enough to justify the volume taken for a 2-point shot.
You want to know why the Jayhawks were a national title contender 1 year ago? It's because the shots that they relied on were 3-pointers and dunks. 3-pointers and dunks, 3-pointers and dunks. That's it. They weren't settling for long twos. They weren't settling for 15-footers from David McCormick. Now, I understand that his game is not Udoka Azubuike. I understand that they've got a little bit of a lack of depth and lack of production in the post. I don't think Mitch Lightfoot should see another minute on the floor in Big 12 play. He's not contributed at all. In fact, at one point, I think it was one of the Iowa State games. I don't remember which one it was that was back to back, but at one point his stat line was like 0 of 6 shooting, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, like 3 turnovers and 2 fouls. And I'm like, why are we playing Mitch Lightfoot? I like Mitch Lightfoot, but why are we playing Mitch Lightfoot? So I understand that the personnel is different right now than what Kansas had a year ago. But this team should be launching the three because, as Weston said, they've got the shooters. They've got Brown, they've got Ochai, they've got Wilson. They're streaky, but they've got them, and they need to be scoring at the rim. That's where this team can win basketball games and not be trading, Big 12 teams that are shooting the three and making them and then trying to feed the post with David McCormick every single time, I guess is my only point. So again, we're at halftime right now with the Sunflower Showdown. Guys, this is a little bit of a different conversation with Kansas than we had with Wichita State, because obviously we know the Jayhawks are making the tournament, but the conversation now is, where will the Jayhawks be seated? I mean, right now, of course, they fell out of the top 25. They're back in this week at number 23. Looks like people like Joe Lenardi had them pegged as somewhere around a 5 or 6 seed. And we've got a few games left in the Big 12 season. We know that this Sunflower Showdown is a must win for the Jayhawks, because then they have a really tough stretch with 3 ranked opponents to end the Big 12 season. So Blake, I'll start with you. Where realistically should we be looking for the Jayhawks to be seeding wise when the NCAA tournament comes around?
If Kansas wins out, they'll be a 2 or a 3 seed. My guess is that they're going to be, I don't think that they will win out. I think that stretch is going to be too difficult. But if they win out and win the Big 12 tournament, they'll be a 2 or a 3 seed. My guess is that they're going to be a 4 or on the 4 or 5 line. If you're optimistic, you'd say the 4 line. I think that they can get above Texas right now. I think that they're going to be in that. If you think they can get above Texas and West Virginia, then you think that they're going to be on the 3 and 4 line. I'm guessing that it's going to be around a 4 seed, maybe a 5 for Kansas. If they don't play well down the stretch, then you're looking at a 7, 8, 9 seed for the Jayhawks.
Weston, what do you think?
There's not much to add to that. I mean, I think absolutely, a 4 or 5 seed, I think, is where they're going to be. I do think the selection committee will be favorable to the Big 12. And I'll be honest, right? I mean, I think blue bloods tend to get a little extra consideration, and not because they are blue bloods, but I think it's just hard to shake, the notion that so-and-so is not good. Now we're going to see
not this year.
Interesting field. That's right. But when they are good, you know what I'm saying? I think Kansas does get a slight bump just in people's mind, because they are so historically good that's going to help them get that 4 or 5 seed in, and the resume supports it. But I think 4 or 5 is right where they're going to be. And if you made me bet on it, I'd bet on a 4 seed.
Yeah, so I really think that these last 3 games for the Jayhawks, and obviously, as of recording this, we don't know if Kansas is going to win the Sunflower Showdown or not. But I think that they can get by Texas Tech at home. I think they can even get by Texas on the road. Obviously, Baylor is going to be a different story. That's inside Allen Fieldhouse on senior day for the Jayhawks. That's going to be a big matchup, but we all know how just dominant Baylor is. Now, they haven't played basketball in quite a while due to another shutdown for the program. So we'll see exactly how they look coming out of that shutdown. But I wouldn't be surprised to see the Jayhawks go 2-1 in their final 3 games in the Big 12. I agree with you. I think a 4 seed is probably where Kansas will end up. I think that Jayhawk fans should be pretty happy with the 4 seed. At least I'm going to be pretty happy with the 4 seed. I think a 5 seed is all right. That's fine. A 6 seed, I just don't. I don't like that. That's prime upset in the first round territory. I mean, so is a 4 seed and a 5 seed. Let's be honest, but you never know.
KU's never been upset in the first round as a 3 seed before.
Well, true. That's a very good point. But I think a 4 seed is probably realistic.
I think the last time, and this isn't current because I'm not looking at it currently, but the last time I had checked bracketology, Joe Lenardi had Kansas playing Belmont.
Great.
Well,
good.
Yeah.
You know what? Bring on Belmont. I hope that I would love to play Belmont and have KU beat them by 100. That's what I would like.
I just don't like any team that Kansas faces. I don't like any team that Kansas faces in the first round that their name starts with a B, like Bucknell or Bradley or a team like that.
I mean, do you really feel great about second round losses? I mean, first round losses, in my mind, are the only way that Kansas basketball has a failure of a season is if they don't make the tournament or lose in the first round. But I mean, really, do we really feel really great about that UNI loss in the second round? I mean,
True.
that was terrible. Gut red,
What was
hated
that?
that loss.
What was that kid's name? Ali Faroukmanish? Is that his name?
Yeah, I mean, I don't care. I'm still trying to erase his memory, but yeah, I think it's Farouk. Yeah, whatever. I don't want to say it.
I'll never forget that name for as long as I live. So as of right now in the Sunflower Showdown, the second half is underway. Christian Brown is shooting free throws. I'm not going to give you the play-by-play, but it looks like the Jayhawks have an 8-point lead right now, 27-19. We'll give you another update on this game in just a few minutes or so. Let's transition into some K-State talk. Obviously, the Sunflower Showdown is still going on right now, but that's not really the direction of the conversation as far as this game is concerned for Kansas State. It's more of what Blake alluded to a week ago, and that was that Gene Taylor, athletic director for Kansas State, reaffirmed his commitment to Bruce Weber as head coach next season for the Kansas State Wildcats. So, Weston, I'm going to start with you. Gene Taylor came out pretty strong in defense of his head coach. I know you alluded to it last week, how big of a fan you are as far as continuity of the head coach and program. Do you still stand by that, or are you surprised that it looks like as of now, Bruce Weber will continue on in Manhattan?
Well, I mean, yes, I like continuity of the head coach, but I've said on this podcast before that I thought, the time for Bruce Weber was up at Kansas State. And, I think, again, going back to the continuity, though, I don't know if the athletic director, how much involvement he has or conversations he had with some of those guys. And it's probably not direct conversations, but just a feel from particularly those freshmen, and whatever incoming freshmen you have about, their relationship with Bruce Weber, how it's going, how things are. And I would have to say to some degree, he's got to have a sense of that heartbeat of that team, of what's going on, how they're responding to Bruce Weber and what you want to build off of, right? Because you certainly don't, if you lose Bruce Weber and, for instance, you lose Nigel Pack because Bruce Weber's gone, you're just setting yourself back even more, especially if there's not a big name out there that you think you're going to get, or you have your eye on a more mid-tier guy that's an up-and-coming coach. If that market's just not there, continuing or firing your coach just for the sake of bringing in someone new is not necessarily the right thing to do. But again, I am very surprised that he said this. I thought for sure his time was done in Kansas State, particularly, as we've talked about the loss to Fort Hays State, followed by some really bad basketball after that. So pretty surprised by this decision. But I'll certainly stand by continuity. I think the longer you can keep a head coach around, I think that's better to build relationships within the program and recruits moving forward.
If you want to believe that Bruce Weber is not the answer for Kansas State, there is information out there that would lead you to believe that. They've lost 12 games in a row, which I believe is the worst stretch in Kansas State basketball history. If you don't want Weber, you'll point out that these are by far the two worst seasons of his career. He's never had back-to-back losing seasons until this year, and he will register back-to-back losing seasons once this year is complete. Since being the runner-up at the NCAA tournament in 2005, they've gone 5-9 at the NCAA tournament. 3 of those wins came in the Elite Eight run when they had to beat number 16, UMBC Bank, Creighton, and Kentucky, and they probably should have beaten Loyola Chicago to go to the Final Four that year. And you would also point out that the 2018 Elite Eight run was kind of a fluke because they didn't have to play Virginia in the second round because UMBC beat them, which they should, obviously there's no planet on which they should not be playing Virginia in the second round. If you are a person that wants Bruce Weber to be the coach, there is plenty of information you can pull on that would inform that decision as well. He made the Elite Eight in 2018. It hadn't been done since 2010. And before that, it was 1988 when Kansas State made the Elite Eight. Bruce Weber has 5 NCAA tournament appearances in 9 years. He's got more appearances in the NCAA tournament than Frank Martin. And I don't remember hearing a lot of people clamoring for Frank Martin to get fired because they weren't winning enough. His winning percentage is lower. He has 2 more conference championships than Frank Martin. And you would also point out Weber's never had back-to-back losing seasons as a head coach. Nigel Pack is a great talent, 13 points per game. He's second in assists. He's got 63 assists, 33 turnovers coming in to this game in the Sunflower Showdown. He leads the team in steals. There are pieces coming back for Kansas State that should excite you about being a Wildcat basketball fan. So if you like Weber, you will find those reasons that you'd want him to stick around. If you don't like Weber, if you've never liked Weber, then you're going to point to the near future of the last two, to the recent past of the last two seasons and say, Kansas State is moving in the wrong direction. We got to get out. So whatever your mindset is, there is information to back up the way that you think.
You know, I came on this podcast a couple of weeks ago and I said there was no chance in hell. Those are my words exactly. No chance in hell that Bruce Weber would return as coach for the Wildcats next season. Clearly, I was wrong because Gene Taylor has basically put all that to rest. And I'm surprised by that. Not surprised that ultimately Bruce Weber has stayed at Kansas State or will stay at Kansas State, but surprised that Gene Taylor came out so defiantly and basically just said, nope, he's staying, because most athletic directors in the situation that Kansas State is in right now would have had some sort of politically correct answer of saying, you know, we'll evaluate at the end of the season, or, you know, we know that the results are not where, you know, our fans' expectations are, and we'll have a conversation with the coach at the end of the season, blah, 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 blah. And Gene Taylor just basically said, nope. Bruce Weber's our guy. He's coming back. He's going to be the coach. And that was a little bit surprising to me as far as the tactic and the strategy was, because I get it's continuity. I get it's recruiting. It's, you know, signaling to the incoming class that, you know, Bruce Weber is not going anywhere. But here's what's interesting is that I would venture to guess, and maybe you guys can think of somebody that's more like this than Bruce Weber. I don't think that there is a more polarizing coach in college basketball at a national level among his own fan base than Bruce Weber is at Kansas State University. And it's, you know, I would say even at the height of this success that Bruce Weber has had over the years at Kansas State, the Elite Eight run, the Big 12 championships, there was still a pretty vocal section of Kansas State fans that were anti-Bruce Weber during that time. And obviously that division grows, it ebbs and it flows depending on the success of the year, you know, for Kansas State. I'm not so sure that there's another coach in college basketball at a national level that is constantly, his merits as coach are being debated year in and year out, as far back as when he replaced Frank Martin. What was that, back in 2011 or 2012 when Bruce Weber came in?
2013 was the first year. And I actually think you're right, Tommy, because I've talked to Kansas State fans and they will tell me, you know, I've never liked Bruce Weber. I didn't like the hire, and I don't like him now. And there are other fans that say, hey, you know, look at what he's done for the program. Like, are you more interested in being right about Bruce Weber, or are you more interested in just supporting Kansas State men's basketball?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And, you know, I think that the one argument that I would make more than any other argument about why it's time to move on from Bruce Weber is not even about the results on the court. Now, we know that that's ultimately where, you know, the buck stops, the wins and losses and how the team is performing.
Unless you're talking about KU football.
Very true. But I would say that the reason why it's time to move on is because when you look at the fan base for Kansas State, I can guarantee you, of course, the Sunflower Showdown is going on right now as we speak, as we're recording this. I guarantee you that there is a huge section of Kansas State basketball fans, some of which because the game is on ESPN Plus, but a huge section of fans are not watching the game. They checked out. They're done following the team for the rest of the season. They're probably done following the team until something of merit brings them back in. The one thing about Kansas State basketball, it's different than like a Jayhawks basketball, is that the fan support is a roller coaster, right? It's never consistent. And of course, Kansas fans have been spoiled all these years, but year in and year out, the support is there. For Kansas State basketball, it's not. And so if Gene Taylor and the athletic department, if they want to stop that roller coaster, or at least attempt to stop the roller coaster, they might have to start from scratch, but they need to find a coach that can rally the fan base to say, stick with us consistently, not just when we're going to the Elite Eight, not just when we're Big 12 champions, but when we are struggling and rebuilding, and don't just check out and ignore us and don't follow us until we're good again, because that's not going to do anybody any good. And it's been proven over his tenure at Kansas State that Bruce Weber, number one, is polarizing, and number two, does not get the fan or the donor support. Not only when the team is bad, but even when the team is pretty good, he's not getting the full support. So if I were Gene Taylor, I would say we need to evaluate this, and then not just the results on the court, but also we need to just overall improve the culture of Kansas State basketball in general. I don't know if you guys have any follow-up on that.
The only thing I'll add, and this is, I'm not backing this by any type of statistics, more just my experience with Kansas State fans, and maybe because I don't have friends with a lot of other fan bases other than Kansas State, Kansas. I went to law school at UMKC, so a little bit of Mizzou, but maybe more so than any other fan base that I've met. Kansas State fans love to complain about Kansas State and still support it wholeheartedly, though. So I actually, my pushback, Tommy, would be, I think it doesn't matter who's there. The Kansas State fans love to complain about Kansas State basketball and yet support it or watch, go to games anyways. And maybe you've got some numbers to be like, no, Weston, you're clearly wrong. But that's been my experience, it seems like, with that fan base.
I mean,
well, I would answer that. Well, let me answer your question really quick, Weston. As far as the big name donors, I mean, it's coming straight from Gene Taylor's mouth himself. He says, and I quote, and these are the high dollar donors. He says, some are Bruce supporters and some aren't, to be honest with you. It's as simple as that. And that's not just this season. That's been all time in the Bruce Weber tenure. You're never going to get 100% of the fan base around you, but I'd like to think that maybe there's somebody out there that's not going to make the fan base or the donor base as divided as Bruce Weber has at Kansas State.
But that's kind of my point. That's kind of my point, though. Is he saying, though, that those donors who don't support Bruce Weber, has he said they're not donating to the basketball program or to Kansas State athletics? Because that's kind of my point, is if they're like, hey, we don't love Bruce Weber, by the way, here's a check to upgrade athletic department, facilities. That's kind of representative of what I'm saying, I guess. But and I get, we don't know that, so there's no point in going down that rabbit hole. But that's just my thought.
I mean, I think it's really interesting because I do have some numbers. Back in 2015, 2016, Kansas State went 17-16. They were 5-13 in the Big 12. Their average attendance was 11,903. You go to the Elite Eight season, I think it was. They were here. Let's go to 2018, 2019. They were 25-9, 14-4 in the Big 12, and their average attendance was actually down to 10,640. So you can read this one of two ways. You can take the Tommy perspective and say Kansas State doesn't have support. Or you can argue, well, the capacity is only about 12,400. They've always got support. They're averaging 10,000 fans, whether they're good or bad. So I think that you can use those statistics to justify your position either way. I would be more of the, more aligned with Weston and say, people are coming out, and if they can put 10,000 people in the stands every year, even when it's not a good team, that speaks more to Kansas State's, I guess, support. Now, last year, obviously, they only averaged 8,400. It was a bad year, and I'm sure this year, if they would be allowed to have more fans in, it would have been even worse of attended of a year. But just going back, if you take out the last 2 years, the attendance has been fairly consistent just for the last few that I've been looking at it, between 10,500 and 11,500 in there.
So we have a little bit of, in my opinion, a reversal of the roles here just a bit, because, I've been on the record saying that Bruce Weber should not return at Kansas State, but rather than Weston riding the fence, it sounds like Weston is pro Bruce Weber sticking around at Kansas State, while Blake is the one who is kind of riding the fence. Because Blake, you just said in your monologue at the very beginning of this about if you're looking to find reasons why you want him
Sure.
gone, they're there. If you're looking to find reasons to keep him, they're there. So you're kind of on the fence with this. Do you have an opinion one way or another? Should Bruce Weber continue being the head basketball coach at Kansas
If
State University?
I was the athletic director at Kansas State, I would hire a new coach. I didn't like the Bruce Weber hire when it was made. I watched his team quit on him at Illinois. I was watching Nebraska, up there in Nebraska, covering the Cornhuskers. So I watched a lot of Nebraska basketball, and that Illinois team was done with Bruce Weber. They were done with his Orange Blazers. They were done with this because he was yelling at them the exact same way he yells at the Kansas State players. And the Illinois players were like, I cannot wait till we get to the end of the season and we don't have to listen to this guy anymore, because they quit on him. And I have never forgotten that. Now, I'm not saying that Kansas State has done that, because you look at Kansas State's results in this 12-game losing streak. They lost by 3 to Texas. They lost by 7 to Oklahoma State. They played Texas Tech to 9. So I feel like they're still playing hard for him. So that informs my decision, and it's not the same to me, because that Illinois team should not have been nearly as bad as they were. That was preposterous that they underperformed to that level. But, if I was the athletic director at Kansas State, I would make a change.
There have been players on this Kansas State team, not this season, but in seasons past, that have gotten into it with Bruce Weber. I don't want to say that they've quit on him necessarily, but even as recently as a year ago, Weston, you and I talked about on an early episode of the podcast about Cartier Jara and the conflict that he had with Bruce Weber. Obviously, Marcus Foster, who was as talented of a player in Manhattan as you will ever have, left the program entirely. And obviously there are two sides to every story, but it has happened in Manhattan as well. I'm not a conspiracy theory kind of guy, but this is something that I do think is interesting. Of course, we're talking about athletic departments around the country. Manhattan's not the only place that this is going on, and it's happening in Lawrence too, and all over the place, where athletic departments are dealing with a major budget shortfall because of the pandemic, and money is extremely tight right now. Bruce Weber will be owed a buyout if he is fired. And so that there might be financial implications there will be financial implications if a change is made at the head coaching position. Now, I did read that if Gene Taylor fires Bruce Weber before April 30th, then Weber is owed $2 million. And if he's fired after May 1st, he's only owed $1 million. So maybe this is Gene Taylor biding some time, although it doesn't sound like it from the words that Gene Taylor had used in that interview just a couple of weeks ago. So
that would be a major curveball if he did that. That would be incredible.
Yeah, so there are some financial implications to a change being made. And as of right now, according to Gene Taylor from Kansas State University, Bruce Weber will remain the coach for the foreseeable future for the Kansas State Wildcat basketball team. Here's a quick update on the Sunflower Showdown. Kansas leads Kansas State by 10, 36-27. And as I say that, the Wildcats just hit a 3-pointer, so it's down to a 7-point lead for the Jayhawks, 36-29, with about 11 minutes
That'd be
to
their
go
first
in
three
the
of the game. If they hit a 3, that's their first 3 of the game in like 15 tries.
Yep, about 11 minutes remaining in that game. Of course, we'll give you another update here in the moments to come. Let's move away from college hoops here on Keeper of the Games and talk a little bit of baseball. It has been forever since we had talked about Kansas City Royals baseball here on Keeper of the Games, and pitchers and catchers reported on Wednesday, which obviously kicks off spring training around Major League Baseball. But before that day, before pitchers and catchers report, there was a big trade that happened for the Kansas City Royals. Andrew Benintendi from the Boston Red Sox was traded just a few days ago to the Kansas City Royals. One of the biggest, if not the biggest trade that we've seen the Royals execute in the last couple of seasons. It definitely provides a big bat in the lineup for the Royals, for Mike Matheny's crew. It also gives the Royals a good replacement in the outfield since Alex Gordon is no longer part of the team. So Weston, I will start with you. I'm sure you've had plenty of time to dissect and to digest this trade. And now Andrew Benintendi is now a member of the Kansas City Royals. Your thoughts on him joining the Royals squad?
Look, I absolutely love the trade, and I tell you what it says about the spot the Royals are in, or where the GM thinks that they are, is they're ready to contend, or at least make a push for the playoffs anyways. Otherwise, you're not trading away assets for a guy who's got 2 years left on a contract. So I'm excited about that. I think it's great. He's shown some serious upside in the past with the Red Sox, played some really good baseball. He's only 26 years old, so potential to, hopefully sign him in a long term if things pay off. But you got to be excited about where the Royals think that they are, even if you don't, necessarily not everybody might agree that the Royals are ready to contend. But now, quick update, guys. I'm going to do a first on the podcast here. I'm going to kick it over to Blake, and I'm going to step away for a second because I forgot to get my charger and my laptop's going to die.
You do that. Well, so here's the thing, Tommy. I don't want to throw like just ice water on this whole thing, but can we relax on Andrew Benintendi just a little bit? Let's look at the numbers and look at some actual data here. Not going to count 2020, had a rib injury. You're right. This is an absolutely actual, a real factual take that's based on real numbers. 2020, we're going to throw out because he only played 14 games. He had a rib injury. 2019, worst batting average season of his career. 2019, worst on base percentage. Second worst slugging percentage, worst OPS. He didn't have that great of a season. Worst defensive runs saved in 2019. So statistically, he had his worst wins above replacement season out of 3 full seasons in 2019, a negative D-WAR for the first time in his career, dips in his batting average, on base, slugging, and OPS from 2018. I think he can play, and I think that he's a nice player, but I don't believe that he automatically vaults the Royals into playoff status. I mean, he hit one night, he didn't play much last year, and I get that. We don't know exactly where he is coming along with the ribcage injury, but just judging on what he did in 2019, let's just slow down on the Royals to the World Series train because of Andrew Benintendi.
Well, I have a rebuttal to that, though, and go ahead.
Oh, you guys can't figure out who wants to argue with me first?
Yeah, that's right. I just want to add, and I want to make a distinction of my point. It's not that I'm saying the Royals are going to be a playoff team or to the World Series. Now, I will make that prediction later. But my point was, it's where the Royals, how they assess the team as an organization, that's probably what I'm focused on. They think they have a contender and that they're not, and they've got the guys that are ready. So as a fan, I think you always want that, right? Because in baseball, we know how this goes, right? You have to go through a rebuild, you sell off, and it produces a pretty poor product on the field. So at least you're in a position now where the Royals are ready to win, and it's going to create, at a bare minimum, much more exciting games and a much more exciting product on the field as we watch this year and into next.
To follow up on that, this is, in my opinion, this trade represents more of a qualitative move for the Royals and their organization than a quantitative move for the Royals and their organization, because it would have been very easy for Dayton Moore and Mike Matheny to sit down and say, you know what, Alex Gordon is retiring. We've got a couple of prospects that look like eventually they can fill the void of Alex Gordon. So we're going to go ahead and give them left field, for this upcoming season. We're still a couple years away in our rebuild. So it's all right. We can let these guys, maybe platoon in left field or see who comes to play, and they'll get the full-time starting role. They didn't do that. Instead, they went out and got Andrew Benintendi, who is a proven commodity. Now, whether or not he had he's dealing with injuries or having a rough season, to me, again, this shows, and not just Weston saying that it shows a belief in themselves that they can win, but I also think they want to show the fan base that they believe that they can win, and they are going to go out and make the moves necessary to do so. And Benintendi is not the only one that they've done The only move that they've made to show that. Signing Carlos Santana, who I know is probably on the downswing of his career, but still, he's a proven commodity as well. They go out and they get him. I think that they have shown we're not just content with having these guys in our farm system who are unproven and we don't know if they're going to make it or not. Just give them a starting role, on this team. We want somebody who is proven to come out and play for our squad this season. So to me, it shows they think they're a lot closer to where they need to be than what they were a year ago or 2 years ago, for sure. So that's my point as far as Andrew Benintendi. I don't know. Do you have a rebuttal on that, Blake?
I mean, if you want to bring up Carlos Santana, he hit 199 last year. That was by far the worst offensive season of his career. He was a proven commodity. This reminds me of when the Royals spent way too much money on Juan Gonzalez and Benito Santiago, which were fantastic players. Absolutely tremendous players for the Texas Rangers and for the San Francisco Giants. They were not tremendous players for the Kansas City Royals. It was way too much money. Two of the worst free agent signings. Carlos Santana hit 199 last year. I mean, what are we talking about? Santana is coming in. He's going to rescue the Royals.
Was that in the dead ball? Is that in the dead ball era, Blake? Is that when you were watching last back with Juan Gonzalez and Benito Santiago?
I absolutely quit on so I had never been like a real hardcore Royals fan like Jayhawks or Chiefs, but when they signed those two guys, I did. I'm not going to watch the team implode like this, and they were historically awful for the next few seasons. And yeah, I absolutely checked out after those two guys.
If you want a baseball team, and here's the thing, before I even say this, I'm not even going to respond to you comparing Andrew Benintendi and Carlos Santana to Juan Gonzalez and Benito Santiago. That's the stupidest, that's the worst hot take I have heard you make in forever.
Why?
That is terrible. Because those guys...
Andrew Benintendi was not being compared to those two guys at all. This is about Carlos Santana. Said. No, I didn't say. Andrew Benintendi is a 26-year-old player. Carlos Santana is 34. And those two guys were in their 30s when they were brought in. So Benintendi is not being drawn an analogy to those two guys.
I'm pretty sure, and I'll have to check this and come back to this in our corrections and retractions. I'm pretty sure that both Juan Gonzalez and Benito Santiago were in their early 40s when they played for the Royals. It's night and day different. Carlos Santana is 34 years old, still has some gas left in the tank, I would think. But beyond that, beyond that, moving away from that, if you're Dayton Moore, and you believe that your team has the talent to at least attempt to contend in the AL Central. Let's not forget, in the shortened season last year, they went 26-34, which wasn't great, but they contended for a hot minute there in the AL Central. So if they think that there's promise with this squad, you should absolutely have guys like Andrew Benintendi and Carlos Santana who have a playoff pedigree. They know how to play in the postseason joining your squad. Now they're obviously Salvador Perez is still on that team. He knows how to play in the playoffs, but by and large, this Royal squad is young and inexperienced, especially in the playoffs. So this is Dayton Moore saying, I believe in our team. I believe in the tools. And if we can get there, then I want a couple of veterans on the team that know how to win games in the postseason. And I love the move. I think it's a smart move.
You want to go ahead and look up Juan Gonzalez's age, or do you want me to?
I'll do it.
He's the same age that Carlos Santana is right now. They're both 34. So what are you talking about?
If we spend any more time talking about...
Did you look that up?
39. Not in his 40s.
Thank you.
How many listeners do you think were...
Thank you. You just said he was 45.
I say it was 45. Weston, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have a feeling we have approximately 0 listeners who are in for Juan Gonzalez and Benito Santiago talk on this podcast. But anyways, going back to the actual trade itself, I like it because to me it's kind of low risk again, and that's ultimately any of these moves. Same with Carlos Santana. You can like it or love it, it doesn't matter. Here's the point: is they're not tied to him in a long extended of time. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and it's no big deal. You thought you were if you think we were in a rebuild anyways, that's fine. Same with Benintendi. We didn't give up a lot, at least in my opinion. There might be some who are higher on Khalil Lee than I was. I just don't. I never really. I mean, obviously he didn't have any stay with the actual Royals, and it's just minor league stats. But I just never was impressed with him. He's small. He's going to be a stolen base, get on base kind of guy. The game's has its moments of moving away from that. And then Frenchie Cordero, who he gave up. Again, he was a almost a throwaway last year. I mean, he had good moments for us last year, but he was brought in via trade as well. So I just don't think we gave up much to see if Andrew Benintendi can be the kind of player that he has shown he has the potential to be. And I know that's just all talk, right? It's just potential. But anytime if the Royals are willing to spend, I will never have a problem with that, assuming it's not a Gil Mesh, lock him up for a long time, where it does hurt the future of the Royals, right? If you spend money over an extended period of time. But if they just want to have a high payroll for 2021, cool. I don't care as long as it's not hurting the future if it doesn't work out by taking the chance on a guy like Carlos Santana, on a guy like Andrew Benintendi, on a guy like, we talked a little bit. I can't even remember if we mentioned, bringing in Michael Taylor from the Nationals, or was with the Nationals. Yeah. Those kind of things don't bother me if as long as the organization isn't going to hamstring themselves moving forward.
But it's also an opportunity cost too, though, Weston. You have the cost. That money is tied up that you could have tried to get another player. And again, I'm not trying to just totally bash on Carlos Santana. If he only had to play the Royals, he would be the best player of all time because he's crushed the Royals. But his career batting average is 248. I mean, he's never batted 300. He has one All-Star season.
But here's the thing: opportunity cost. There has to be somebody else, though.
I get it, and maybe there wasn't. The Royals, as you said, the Royals they don't have a New York Mets or a New York Yankees or a Boston Red Sox budget. They've got to play more in the money ball. I get that. I understand that, and somebody's got to play first base, and maybe he's going to be really, really awesome defensively. Looking at the D-WAR real quick, his D-WAR in 11 seasons is -6. So, that's fine, sure. I guess.
But and again, you're looking at, and I think of too, the flip argument in my mind of what I'm pitching is, okay, are you stunting growth of young guys? And at first base right now, it's Ryan McBroom and Ryan O'Hearn. They're not the long-term answer for the Royals at first base. Maybe you guys got some younger guys, but and same with the outfield. We've got some young guys, and then nobody that has just really panned out. So, I guess it's all that's going to matter. Frankly, again, I'm going to go back to my original point. I'm just excited that the Royals think that they're in a spot, and I actually think it speaks to their pitching more than anything else. I think they're very excited about their young arms that says we need to capitalize again before these guys become stars, and then we have to pay them, knowing that they probably won't be able to. You got to be able to put the bats together with the young, talented arms if you think those arms are ready to be high-end big league starters.
Well, good news. If you are playing at home on your bingo card, if you have Gil Mesh, Benito Santiago, and Juan Gonzalez being mentioned on the podcast on your bingo card, you have won $1 million. Congratulations. Because I guarantee you nobody had that on their at-home listening bingo card. We will have a full update on the Royals, a full preview of them in spring training in the coming weeks. It is getting to be that time of year, folks, and it's my favorite time of year when spring comes around and baseball season gets going. So again, we'll talk more about the Royals on a future episode. Let's go ahead and get into our Wichita Whip Around here on Keeper of the Games. We're keeping with the round robin format here on the program. And so let's go with Weston. I will start with you. What is your Wichita Whip Around topic tonight?
So I have two. One's going to not be Wichita related just because I want to mention this. I don't know if you boys saw this.
No, it's not the Wichita. It's not the whatever you want whip around. It's the
I
Wichita
know, but listen,
whip around.
it's huge news. I just want to know, did you guys see Tim Tebow announced his retirement from baseball today?
No,
So
who cares?
Tim Tebow officially retired from professional sports. Now, to my Wichita story. And I'm going to it's kind of a piggyback. It just came up, but it's a piggyback, Blake, off of you talking Wichita State Shocker baseball last time. Outfielder Cooper Kornblum, who now might be my favorite name in all of baseball. It used to be Franchi Cordero, but now that he's no longer with the Royals, I'm going to move on to Cooper Kornblum. And then right-handed pitcher Liam Eddy were named to D1 Baseball's preseason power rankings. And that's Cooper Kornblum. Came in at 76th on the top 100 outfield list, which I know 76 seems far off, but I mean, there's a ton of outfielders in Division I baseball. So that's 76th for Cooper Kornblum, and then 87th for Liam Eddy on the top 150 starting pitchers list. So looks like a couple of, early praises for the Wichita State Shocker baseball players.
So I'll go
Blake,
with Newman.
what is yours?
So Newman baseball, they've been trying to open up the series. It got canceled, postponed it again to Tuesday, February 23rd against Wayne State, a 1 p.m. doubleheader at McCarthy Field. I'm rocking the Newman tonight. It's basketball shirt, but it's fine. Coach Mouse, don't yell at me. But that's actually not my whip around. How about the Friends University Baseball Falcons? They've actually gotten to play baseball. Wichita State was going to play a game against Oklahoma and Texas, and that got postponed. The Falcons are 7-1. They haven't played since February 5th, a 2-game sweep of St. Mary. They are heading to the University of Science and Arts in Oklahoma, February 19th in Chickasha for a doubleheader. Next home game, February 23rd against Mid-America Christian. And Jordan Burnett leading the Falcons right now, hitting .375, and Larry Rivera is hitting .346. 7-1 start for your Friends Falcons.
Tommy, as the two Southwestern Mound Builder alum, do we go ahead and boot Blake off the show for mentioning the Friends Falcons, or I don't know how we go about this?
Mound Builders?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, Weston, how you felt about the fact that we have to sit here and listen to talk about Friends University on the program.
I think I coined the phrase when I was there, friends don't let friends go to friends. And then I went ahead and married a girl from the Friends University basketball team. So I've come around on the Friends Falcons. I know my mound builder brethren won't be happy to hear that, but also a little fun circle around there. Former defensive coordinator for Southwestern College, Dion Manili, is now the head coach of the Friends Falcon football team. And a little birdie on my shoulder has told me that former Southwestern head football coach Ken Crandall has been up in the booth at times as a offensive advisor for Dion. So I've got a lot of connections with the program now.
You guys are 2-1 on the year, so I mean, you took 2 of 3 from Presentation College. So
hey, there
you go. But since then, a bunch of snow.
I did also, I don't know if you saw this, but former Southwestern and Friends head coach Monty Lewis is now the head coach at Winfield High School. So returning down to Winfield to coach the Vikings, which is,
I don't know how well you guys know him. He is a good guy. One of the nicest guys that I ever got to interview on the radio. Just an all-around good man, and I'm really happy to see that he's landed on his feet here in South Central Kansas.
Absolutely. So my Wichita Whiparound story is all about the Wichita Wind Surge. The announcement was made just a few days ago that the Wind Surge have officially accepted their invitation to become the AA affiliate of the Minnesota Twins. We talked about it at length on this program. It was kind of just a matter of time. It was a formality, but the Wind Surge did accept that invitation. And I actually have some news that I don't think anybody's reporting on. And I guess I'm the source because I got the email today from the Wichita Wind Surge that they expect to have a schedule by next week. So hopefully by next week's program, there will be a Wichita Wind Surge schedule. I was contacted due to tickets for this season. So they hope to have a schedule here in the next few days. So that's exciting. And then finally with the Wind Surge, I don't know if you guys saw, they are accepting applications for a mascot. So if either one of you would like to become the Wichita Wind Surge mascot, applications are now being accepted at this time.
How warm is the costume?
I have no idea. I don't know.
I think that could
Any interest in that?
I think that could be some good PR for the KOG pod. I mean, maybe it doesn't even have to be one of the three of us. Maybe we can just sneak someone in there who's willing to give us a shout out. Maybe we need to have a say in the application process. I also wish
I like it. One of us needs to apply.
I also wish you would have just said according to sources, just so it felt like the Keeper of the Games podcast had sources.
I'm the source, actually. Yeah, exactly. So that is our Wichita Whiparound here on Keeper of the Games. Before we get out of here, any corrections, retractions, additions? Blake, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'd like Tommy is going to apologize for not ringing the hot take horn for accurate takes today, because the Carlos Santana take is absolutely accurate, and I know you feel really badly about yelling at me like that. So, but it's okay. It's okay though. I appreciate the apology, and thank you so much for agreeing with me on that take, because it's absolutely right.
Weston, how about you? Corrections, retractions, additions?
I've got nothing. Nothing here, guys.
Nothing to even contribute on that. I do have an addition before we get out of here. So we've got under 2 minutes left in the Sunflower Showdown. The Kansas Jayhawks have opened up a 21-point lead over the Kansas State Wildcats.
Let's go!
The current score, actually, it looks like they just made another 3-pointer. So it's now a 24-point lead over the Kansas State Wildcats, 59-35. If the Kansas State Wildcats, if the Kansas State Wildcats can only put up, if they can put up less than 40 points at home inside Bramlage against their in-state rival, and Gene Taylor is going to tell you that Bruce Weber is the best choice to coach this team, it's just mind-boggling. It's just insane to me. 35 points. Are you kidding me right now?
It's not great. It's makes your sell a little bit harder if you're Mr. Taylor today. That's for sure.
Does anybody know if Bill Snyder can coach basketball, or what's that situation?
Yeah, how did that work out for Kansas State the last few years he was there?
True.
Nothing against Bill. Bill Snyder is a legend, but I think his time has come.
At this point, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't think Kansas has played their best game. They've only scored 59 points, but the fact that they've only given up 35 points to the Wildcats is just, there's a minute 23 left in this game. Kansas State isn't going to score 40. They are not going to score 40
Tommy,
points.
We had this discussion about how KU has struggled defensively at times. Now, they've started to play better these last few games. You play Iowa State, that's going to help. You play Kansas State, that probably helps too. But they've played better. But you and I have talked about that, how KU has not played as well defensively this year as they normally do. So for Kansas State to not do that against a bad KU defensive team, that also says something else.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to be our show for tonight. Just a reminder to hit subscribe and download, listen to the podcast on all major streaming platforms. Again, we're on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio. Basically, anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, you can find Keeper of the Games. Right there, our website, KOGsports.com, where you can watch episodes there. You can also watch it on YouTube and Facebook by searching for Keeper of the Games. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at KOGpod. That's at KOGpod. Let's get our personal Twitter handles out there. Blake, I will start with you.
For our dear audio listeners, at BE Cripps, BECRI PPS.
At WMills94. At WMills94.
All right. There you go. You can follow me at Tweets from Tommy. It looks like the game is just about final for the Sunflower Showdown. In fact, they're going to run out the clock here. It looks like Kansas State did score over 40. They've got 41 points. But still, it looks like final score here is going to be 59-41 in the Sunflower Showdown, just as we're ending the program. How about that for timing, you guys? That's pretty great.
Yeah, not bad.
And it looks like with 41 points, Kansas State can keep Bruce Weber, right, Tommy?
I still don't think that's the best move, but we can get into that more on another episode of the podcast. Hope you have a great week. We'll be back next week for another episode of Keeper of the Games. For Blake Cripps and Weston Mills, I'm Tommy Castor. We'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.
You've been listening to Keeper of the Games with Tommy Castor, Weston Mills, and Blake Cripps. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen on all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Visit our website at KOGsports.com. Find the podcast and videos on Facebook and YouTube at Keeper of the Games, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at KOGpod. That's KOGpod.